Thank you and welcome. Mike, we are so thrilled to have you. How do you appear to your audience virtually? That's a question Mike Carr asked himself as far back as college when he appeared in a local television commercial. He looked awful, and so he started studying the characteristics that made someone come across well on camera. I'm sure he didn't look awful. He told me to read that part. I had to add that in because you're such a handsome man. I can't picture you looking awful. Okay, that was ad-libbed. That is what Mike will share with you all today. Mike first joined Toastmasters 25 years ago to help his communication stay on track, stay on time, and eliminate filler words. At that time, he had one wife, one kid, and very few stories. Today, Mike cannot count the ways Toastmasters has helped him in life and in work. From his work in the United States Senate to his role as a senior leader in multinational investment banks, from starting several businesses to serving on boards, the lessons learned in Toastmasters have helped Mike achieve his results. But more importantly, Mike has learned how to be happy while chasing those results. Today, he still has one wife, but now has 8 kids and many more stories. He is still an active member of Toastmasters in Austin, Texas. And when not being a dad, Mike is a partner in a financial firm and runs his own business. He frequently speaks internationally to large organizations like Merrill Lynch, UBS, Hewlett-Packard, and innumerable small ones about the stories we tell others, the stories we tell ourselves, and the stories we choose to listen to. Mike is the 2020 World Champion of Public Speaking and is known in the financial world as the economic storyteller. Please join me as we welcome distinguished Toastmaster Mike Carr.
Oh, thank you all. It is so great to be with you in sunny Florida. I'm looking right outside my window and I'm looking at the same sunshine that you are, just thousands of miles apart, but it's the same sunshine. I love it. What is somebody shout out? What is the temperature there?
In Tallahassee, it's about 80 degrees.
82 here.
All right. All right. With about how much humidity?
About 100%. No, not really.
All right. Well, it's about 80 degrees in Austin too, with a little less humidity, but not that great ocean that you all have just on both sides of your amazing state. Thank you so much for inviting me in and giving me the opportunity to kind of talk about how we maximize our virtual presence. I'd like to talk about how we do that in the context of Toastmasters, but also increasingly how we do that in just the context of our life and the tools that are increasingly available, how we build that, and maybe what that future looks like that way. I would like to ask, so I know a little bit about who the audience is. Could you raise your hand if you work for a nonprofit? All right, could you raise your hand if you work for a for-profit company, business? And then if it's an education or government organization, could you raise your hand? Okay, all right, yeah, thank you. That helps me get a feel for a little bit, a pretty balanced group there. All of this journey really began in 2015. When I got in the car and she took off. Now, my fellow Toastmasters, that's how I started my contest speech that ended up going to winning district in that year. Most people saw that and they thought I was crazy, and appropriately so. I was zipping all over. It was a live, obviously in-person staging event, and I would go all across the stage making this noise. It just really didn't seem to catch people as much off guard as I thought it was going to, but they were wondering, where on earth is this going? So I was at district, and I won't mention who it was, but there were 2 world champions who were in there, and they were saying, oh, I love that speech. Maybe you ought to go forward. But one of them later on was saying, I don't think that I would use that car screeching bit at the beginning. And I had a lot of feedback from my fellow Toastmasters in our district saying, oh, that seems like a little bit too much. So I took it out and went to semifinals. And I did not even place. So I think my first point that I want to say to all of us, whenever we're talking about maximizing what we can do with virtual, is that it's differences that stick in our minds. It's differences that stick in judges' minds. It's differences that cause people to remember our stories. And that, by necessity, means that we're taking risk. Now, it's a tough thing when we're talking about the contest, because judges, they like to see things that are sort of like they've seen before. It can't be too far off the deep end. But then they also really love something novel. They love something that's new. And so how to not be exactly like someone else, but also not be too risky, too far off that end, so that judges then say, oh, that just seemed weird to me. That requires some experimentation and a whole lot of practice. But I happened to give a little speech a couple of years ago in the finals of the World Championship of Public Speaking, where I ended up starting the speech right down here, not with that spotlight of the sun on the day of, but it got me today, and pulled, this over like a door. I really thought that the judges were going to hate it. I really did. You may remember that there was a guy who followed me in that contest, an amazing speaker who will be world champion of public speaking if he continues in the contest, a guy named Kwong Yu Yang, amazing storyteller. He was following me in the contest, and I knew, oh, this is Kwong's year. He's going to win this contest. So all I thought I would get out of the World Championship of Public Speaking that year was maybe a video that I could show businesses, and they would bring me in to speak about innovation, about taking risk, about creating an environment to take risk. And I thought that's kind of fun, that it would be a speech with a lot of risks in it, starting down here, a speech talking about taking risk. And then the judges ended up liking it. But what I'm seeing advance now forward in the contest are individuals who are taking those calculated risks. I saw somebody the other day who in a contest talked about jumping out of a plane and pulled the camera down here and was doing this, lost my microphone, doing this the whole time as he simulated falling through space. I thought it was brilliant. I thought I never would have thought of that. It was very creative, and that kind of thing is grabbing people's attention. So if we're wanting to maximize the virtual environment, it is a new reality of virtual communication. And in the contest area, the new reality is, and I'm even seeing it bleed over a little into the in-person, that people are pushing the envelope. And that may mean in a certain year that you may not advance. But the reason I started with the story that I did, when I took out the screeching car all over the stage, was that I played it safe. and I didn't advance. And so I could have taken the risk and may have seen something happen. There are no guarantees, and you never know what a group of judges are going to like. And so I would encourage all of us to try working with this box. Try working with all of the different things that we can do. The reason I started down in this corner in the World Champion of Public Speaking was the day of, I was really nervous. You know, we're getting ready to record. I had all this nervous energy. I'm just kind of bouncing around. This is what I do. I was looking at, I thought, oh yeah, look at all, you know, if I come up here and I stick my, you know, nostrils up in the camera, and I'm just doing all kinds of crazy stuff just to pull my mind away what was happening. And I happened to put my face in all of these corners to sketch out the box, and I hit down here, and I thought, haha, I look like a little kid. And then it hit me, I start this speech as a little kid. I could start down here. And that's what so many people talk to me about, is they come back and they say, oh, when I saw you starting down here, then I was immediately engaged. I knew I was going to love the speech. And they were very kind in saying that. The judges could have hated it, but it's the speeches that advance, especially if you're the first couple of speakers, they're the speeches that are memorable. They're the speeches that are sticky in judges' brains when they have to, in that 1 to 3 minutes, make a determination where they write in names 1, 2, or 3. So the first thing I would ask you is to take risks. Take risks, calculated risks. Like somebody else, I was talking to somebody the other day. He said, "Oh, I hope," because I was telling people, 2x what you thought you were going to do. He said, "Oh, I don't think the screen should be bleeding." And I thought, "Oh, that's kind of fun," but maybe, but most people don't want that. So take risks. The second thing that I would suggest would be, we have to practice to the point that it becomes natural. And I'll tell you a little bit, some of you may have heard me talk about this before. People have said to me that they feel like I'm talking directly to them, or I'm just having a conversation. And I'll tell you, their method to that is that whenever I see the camera here, there's a concept in karate that if you want to break a board, if this is the board, if I want to break the board, I don't punch to the board, I punch through the board, and that breaks the board. And that rolled around in my head as I thought, I don't want to look at the camera. What I would always try to do is place the face of one of my children, or a good friend, or my home Toastmaster club behind the camera, and really see them and speak through the camera to that person. So in the championship winning speech, when Mrs. Montgomery turns and she says, "It's okay that you failed. The victory is not in the result, the victory is in the try." I've made that speech to my kids so often when they've come in and they gave their best, but they got a C on a test, or they tried an athletic event and they came in last. It was like, no. You tried, that's the victory. And placing that child's face right behind the camera then made it more natural. But I had to practice it a lot. And there were many times when if I was recording on a wheel, there would be all kinds of recordings. Getting Zoom up and ready and just speaking to someone, not necessarily even giving the speech, just having a conversation, speaking to that person. Stop, record, go back, look at it. Does it feel natural? If not, why? And if so, then I brought in one of my kids, brought in my wife, and we had a conversation about just anything happening in our day right here, and would then record that, go back, look at that, and what was the difference between the conversation I had with a precious human in my life and the conversation then that I was having on Zoom. Comfort speaks more clearly in our communication than many times even do our words. And even more importantly, it builds trust. And so the more we can be more authentically ourselves in saying whatever, it's going to build that bond of camaraderie and that rapport with our audience, whether there happen to be judges or whether they happen to be investors or whether they happen to be our grandparents or aunt and uncles or grandkids on the other end of this wonderful medium, where some years ago we would have picked up the phone and called. Now we can have a face-to-face conversation, and building that relationship is so much more important. So taking the risk, practicing the relational part of this. If you'll notice, those who kind of stop at division, or those that end up on the semifinal stage and the final stage, many times the difference is how comfortable are they in that communication with their audience, whether it's in person or whether it's in this medium. And so just practicing that, it can become boring and rote, but it yields huge results if we'll look at that. So the practice comes practicing with the sound on and seeing, is it comfortable, maybe comparing that to someone else, but also then practicing it with the sound off. Does it look interesting if the sound is off? And it's kind of a secret weapon to do that. The fourth item I would mention is something that apparently you've already talked about, is that really working out your face. Because if you're making a point, we all think we're overacting. We all think we're extending more than we really are. And so if we come into the camera and we talk like this and we just make our point so exaggerated, then when I come in and I really try to make that point, and all that happens is a single eyebrow raises. It doesn't feel so huge and unnatural. The other, I guess this would be the fifth thing, is really using the depth of the camera. One thing that cannot happen, no matter how small our Toastmaster group is, we can't get right up and have this kind of intimate interaction with however many people are in our audience outside, except we can in this medium. And it's one of the advantages that exist with the virtual. And so really using that, one of the things that we're playing with now in our professional presentations, but also in Toastmasters, is the idea of, can we get rid of that wall? Can we blow that wall out? Well, we can if we turn around and the backdrop is outside. If I really move the camera outside, and that may mean using a GoPro, that may mean using extension cords, of course that's what they're called, moving back outside, it's the kind of thing where we stop and we say, what could be the possibility of that? And I'd encourage us to think about that, is say, so many things, if we just sit and we think, what would be cool in a virtual presentation? Okay, if I were 10,000 feet in the air, if I happened while I was skydiving, if I didn't have this wall behind me, well, of course, but our brain starts coming in and saying, that can't happen. And I would just encourage all of us to ask ourselves, but what if it could? Our brain tells us, oh, that would be really cool, but that can't happen. But what if it could? What would it look like? What if we got close to that? And that's where creativity begins to flourish. That's where I feel confident the guy who did the skydiving with his shirt going all the time, he's looking at what what can make that happen? I can't jump out of a plane on a Toastmaster contest, but what if I could? What would that look like? What would the characteristics be? I talked recently with a young woman who is part of Fidelity Investments. She is in a special program where they're looking at Bitcoin and other digital currencies. They're exploring, is that a real thing? How would that fit in an investment portfolio? It is a program that the daughter of the founder, who's the current chairperson of the corporation, started. And my friend, her name is Brittany, my friend is the only woman in that program. And so I encouraged her. I said, well, who's your idol? And she said, oh, the chairperson, the person who is the founder's daughter. And I said, well, why don't you just email her and ask if we can have coffee? She said, oh, I can't, I could never do that. I could never do that. So where we see each other is at a technology forum in Austin. And I was talking with her again, and she was going to Boston, where Fidelity is headquartered. And I said, well, why don't you email? And another person overheard this and said, oh, I had a young person email me and I thought it was the greatest thing. We sat down, we had a cup of coffee. Long story short, Brittany emailed the chairwoman, and the chairwoman emailed her back and said, I'd love to meet while you're here in Boston. If we can't get together in Boston, I'll come to Austin and we can meet. And it blew her mind. She took a risk, a calculated risk, that only had social impact, but it is going to have a massive, massive impact on her career because she just tried something. That's my encouragement to you, is try things. Now, outside of the Toastmaster world, there are all kinds of new programs that can be added to Zoom. If you've not checked out, has anybody seen Any hands? Okay, yeah, a couple. Have you experimented with it? Do you mind waving at me? You did. Okay. Do you like it? Yes or no? Okay, yeah. So I have corroboration here. I'm not the only crazy one. It's George and me. We're hanging out on the crazy side, but it's great. It puts your slides up in a weatherman format, weather person format, and allows you to do certain things that way. There are all kinds of other plugins that you can do. Multiple camera angles work really well, and you can get on your phone then just a clicker where you can click back and forth between camera angles, and it elevates that. You can see I've grayed out my back here behind me, but I wanted to start with that. And well, here in the question and answer session, I'll take the filter off, because one of the things that is still very true, people like the presentation, they like authenticity more. And so there's some things in the background here that you'll see, like that strange book over there and my granddad's Stetson cowboy hat that he has, and a little table right over here that's just a complete mess. But it's the authenticity, the storytelling that comes across. And I would stop my portion by saying, I do hear a lot of people ask me, if we're maximizing our virtual presentation, do we need more bells and whistles, more lights, more visuals? Do we have to have a visual? And I would say what I heard my good friend David Henderson, who is also a fellow world champion of public speaking, and then Ryan Avery. Ryan talks about props, and David Henderson wears costumes. He wore a costume as he was in his contest. They both say the same thing about props and costumes. They say, never use it unless it helps you tell the story visually. It's the same thing with slides, visuals, bells and whistles, camera angles. But if it takes away from the story, it takes away from the story, and you don't want it. You don't want to have it there. I'm going to open up for questions. Glad to answer anything. I hope we landed somewhere in the realm of what you were hoping to learn, and feel free to ask me anything. I try to be an open book.
Thank you so much, Mike. It was a journey, I have to say, a very fast and furious journey, but one in which we learned a lot. We did have some of our members submit some questions. I'm going to start at what I think is kind of the beginning level question, and that is, what tips do you have? We heard a couple, but what tips do you have when you are competing in a speech contest for taming that nervousness?
Yeah, there are a few. One of them is a mindset piece, that recognizing physiologically, physically in our bodies, the same chemicals are firing, and the same chemicals are firing, the same effects are happening in our body when we feel nervous or scared, and when we feel excited. It's our brain that interprets, and it takes that feeling and interprets it as excitement or nervousness. And so even just the knowledge that, oh, I'm feeling this in my body, or my stomach is churning, that kind of thing. That's the same feeling we have as we feel the roller coaster going over the edge, and we're getting ready to throw our arms up and go, woohoo! So reminding myself that as my brain, the story, you remember some of the things that I speak to industry, it's the story, part of that is the story we tell ourselves. There are so many things that weigh us down simply because of the story we tell ourselves, and so much rocket fuel we can have if we just change our story. And that became a very simple thing, that as I felt that, I could hear if I observed, my brain was saying, I'm really nervous. I'm really nervous, and just verbally out loud, so my ears could hear my voice saying it. I am so excited. I am so excited. I am so excited. I'm so excited to do this. I'm so excited. I am so excited. So that's one thing, mindset, readjusting that, letting our ears and our brain hear our own voices, saying that out loud. All of those are layer upon layer psychologically that help that. Now, the feeling doesn't go away, but it turns, and our creativity kicks in. And so that's one. And movement gets a lot of that energy out. Now, for others, I've had others say, oh, that bothers me. So you need to try that yourself. But for me, movement and working some of that energy out does that. The third thing, maybe this might be the most important, would be, it's not about the audience. It's not about me. It's about the message for that one person. The creator has put the message in me or in you to speak to. It's about you and one person who desperately has to hear your perspective on that message. And so the more we really meditate on that and pray on that and think about that, the more it feels like giving a gift and coming out and just sharing with someone. We don't know who that person is most of the time, but that helps. It takes this fugue of emotion, and it kind of narrows it down a trough that can harness that energy and really help our speech. So those are three things, and I'm not perfect at any of those at any time, or rarely perfect if I ever am, but I hope that helps. Those are three things that I use. I'm really, really big in my life about mindset. If I can get the mindset right, everything else just flows. So those are three things. Hope that helped.
I think those were great tips. And I reflect back on what you said about part of the mindset, I think, is realizing that the victory is not in winning, but is in trying and just going forward and being excited about that opportunity. So great tips. You know what, some people are trying to prepare to get into competitive speaking. What did the road to the World Championship look like for you? Say if someone's going to start they think they want to get there like in 4 years, maybe. Is that a reasonable goal? How long did it take? Can you give us some idea of how that worked for you?
Certainly, certainly. And I'll just say up front, I'm going to be maybe radically transparent. And because of that, I'll say my path may not work for you. And so you have to really seek out what works best for you. But I want to be honest, because my path is rather unorthodox and it flies in the face of conventional wisdom. I started out now it's been 27 years ago, 25, 27 years ago in Toastmasters for a number of reasons. For the sake of time, I won't go into why I went. I had someone tell me, I was doing a business presentation and they basically said, "You're awful and you need to go to Toastmasters." And it was a very good friend who had my best interests at heart, went to Toastmasters. And then I heard about the contest, and immediately I was this very goal-driven person, grew up on Zig Ziglar, and it was the 10-year goal, set 5-year goal, 1-year goal, quarterly goals, maybe even break them down to daily tasks that do that. And I set a goal. I want to be the world champion of public speaking. I started that after whatever year that was. I entered the contest. I wrote on a piece of paper and I stuck it on my mirror. I am world champion of public speaking, whatever date that was. I think it was 1993 or something like that. And I didn't get very far. Then the next year I did it. I made it to district. And I thought, oh, that was wonderful, but then I was disappointed that I didn't get beyond that. And I tried, and sometimes I failed out at area. I don't think I ever lost at club, but it was probably because I would join at least 3 clubs, at least one of those. I knew that no one else was competing and I could get through. Surely no one on this call has ever gamed the system like that, right? But I was that guy, and not ashamed of it. I mean, hey, there's, it's creativity. So fast forward to 2015, when I had the, my speech where I started, and in 2013, I'd gone to semifinals and I'd come in second to Kingy Biddle. He came in second. He was the world champion of public speaking runner-up that year. And I thought, I'm second to the guy who came in second. All right, I'm close to my goal. 2015, I'm coming in with, I felt like it was my best speech ever. I was the 10th speaker, the very last speaker, the last one they heard. I had never given that speech better than I gave it on that day, and I did not even place. And it was in 2015. This is actually part of my business keynote. But I just out of time, I won't go into what built to this mindset. But I walked out of that ballroom and I just decided, I'm done. I'm giving up on this goal of being the world champion of public speaking. And over the course of the next few years, next few months, all of these creative speech ideas started coming up. I was like, no, I'm not going to give that. But then I thought, well, why not just write them as a piece of art and give them to my club and maybe give them 2 or 3 times just as a piece of art, just to be able to try to say something. And one of those speeches was a speech called Blue, that in 2020, with all the pandemic happening, I had a friend who said, I think about that Blue speech so often. Have you thought about entering the contest with it? And I gave up on the goal. I go, well, why do you have to be world champion of public speaking to go into the contest just to share a really good message? So then I won. So trying to skinny this down for time, but my message is that I did not win the World Championship of Public Speaking until I gave up on the idea, gave up on the goal of being the world champion of public speaking. And what happened inside my psychology that I've now deconstructed is I didn't realize that I was so driven by that goal that the fear centers of my brain were fighting against my creativity. What if I don't make it? I was so emotionally invested. What if I don't win? That when I just entered the contest for the love of the contest, for the love of the message, for the love of that one person that the Creator had for me to speak to on that day, creativity flowed, and taking risks didn't matter, because if I lost, I wasn't in it to win anyway. So it's anathema. That message is anathema in our Western world, because you don't give up on your goal, right? But there actually is a whole body of psychology that taught, and there's a Japanese concept called Kaizen that is not goal centric. It is improvement centric, slow but incremental and constant improvement, improving 1/10% every time we speak. And that's my story. Is what I would say to the person if who is just starting in the contest and they're being told set a goal for 4 years from now to do that. I've heard so many people, they hit that 4-year mark and they die of a broken heart. Not really, not literally, but they never enter the contest again because their dreams died of a broken heart, but their best message never got out. And that is tragic. And so maybe, as you can tell, I'm a little passionate about this. For those of you that, eat bullets for breakfast and you set a goal and that motivates you, don't listen to me. Go do that. Keep doing that. But the more I've talked around the world, I end up having so many people come back and saying, oh, I'm so glad you said that, because, I want to be world champion of public speaking, but then all the resistance comes in and the fear sets in. It's like, hey, you don't have to do that. Just go do great work. Just go build a beautiful piece of art that is a speech that you improve little by little over time. And excellence tends to move forward in the contest. Mm-hmm. So sorry, that's a super long answer. It's only about, a little bit of my keynote, but I hope that helps someone. I hope that helps the person that was meant to hear that.
I really love the aspect that you bring up, that maybe it's not so much forming a contest speech, packaging for a contest, as much as it is creating a message, that you really spending time on the message you want to send. And when you really craft that message and move it forward and give it with all of your heart and soul, that is what comes across and includes all of those things. Well, we're going to move along a little bit to a little bit about what you said about the keynote speaking idea, because a keynote's kind of a long time to be on camera. And we want to know what sorts of tips you can share for maybe presenting a really good keynote in a virtual environment. And also maybe what equipment, I know you've shared some equipment tips and tools, but are there anything else you think you can give us about enhancing those presentations? You said that a little bit in your address earlier, but that's kind of the question about a keynote, a longer address.
Certainly. I'll start with some of the equipment. I'm in the contest. I had a wireless mic that then, when I started giving keynotes, it would go out on me, and so I talked to B&H. If you're not familiar with B&H in New York, they are wonderful. They give advice for free. You don't even have to go buy from them. And so, because humans are mostly all good across the board, with some exceptions, but good humans get this advice for free, and then they go and they spend a little more money and they buy from B&H, and it's a great economic model. I got this, if you can see this. This is the lavalier that I'm wearing right now, and I continue to get really good feedback on it, that it's clear, it sounds good. it's got I think a 2-meter cord, which is about a 6-foot cord. So I can come all the way back here, and I think you can still hear me as clear as when I was right up in the camera. But I can,
Absolutely.
I can move around. I can. There was the last keynote that I gave was a sales kickoff for a technology company, and I just happened to be in Colorado on getting ready to do an executive retreat. They ran over, so I had my computer on the bed. I rigged all this stuff I put the table on the bed, my computer's on there, but I had the window behind me with a curtain drawn, so I had all this room to play with. I had a chair that I could get up on and I could talk to, but I had this long cord, and so it allows me to walk around, up on my bookshelf here, and just kind of speak from anywhere, moving around. Well, this is the kind of thing that if you've been sitting in Zoom meetings all day, watching someone whose face is right here, then all of a sudden you get this perspective, and maybe you're back engaged. You're like that. I could even, let me see, hopefully I won't break anything if I jump off. And it worked. Okay. That was actually unplanned. That was kind of fun. I may have to work that into a keynote. So now I'm trying to remember your question.
Equipment and things that are helpful.
Thank you.
Equipment.
So yes, if you saw this, if you want to screenshot it, it's USB. Ceramonic is the lavalier. Best thing. It's $35. Oh, amazing. Let me turn it around. I've got ring lights here, kind of dual ring lights. This one's not on because I have sun coming through the window. And the camera that I'm using is a fisheye Logitech. Tell you what, I'm going to pull it off and unplug it so you can see. This is the camera. Logitech, and I've forgotten the numbers behind it, but if you Google image Logitech camera, and you were doing that. Can you hear me okay?
Your sound is sort of muffled now and going in and out, so perhaps your camera might have picked up some of the sound. I don't know.
I'll start messing with my technology. Probably plug it back in and see if you. Those are some of the things. Sound good?
Now you're crystal clear. So when you do that, as a tip, it totally wrecks your sound.
Okay, that's good to know. I did not know that before. Productive day. I learned something. So technology in the corporate speaking piece and a longer keynote. Keynotes actually are kind of dropping. There, just a few years ago, it was not unheard of to be hired for a 90-minute keynote. Now 90-minute keynotes are almost, in person or virtual, they're almost non-existent. In fact, and I work a lot with professional speakers, what I'm hearing, and I'm seeing this kind of in mine as well, is what's more likely is a 20 to 30-minute keynote followed then setting up and maybe an hour or hour and a half breakout session where there's a lot of meat there. So in a longer keynote, story heavy. Stories are really good. I spoke to a fundraising group, and the best fundraiser in there sat with him at dinner, and he said, Colin Powell, best speaker I ever heard, doesn't have an outline. He just has a collection of stories that he pulls from to make his point. That's very interesting. Now, that's one personality type, a very relational personality type. If you're speaking to technical audiences, they can get frustrated in stories only. And so that's where the story has to set up for bullet points that are tools. And my wife does some of this kind of speaking. And one of the things that she's talked about before is, I want poetry in a toolbox. And that image, I think, works really well. A story that engages people, but also then the technically minded, they have those things. Okay, what can I do with this? And having that. So the longer keynote is kind of the story, the tell them what you're going to tell them, the story with stories making the main points, but toolbox is in there. The longer keynote, though, is where some of the visually interesting things can come in. If you're not going to standing on a desk doing that kind of thing is one. Having slides and pictures, if you've seen any of Seth Godin's presentations, where he just has a picture that sets up humor and he goes with that's a great tool to do. Or even having other people, I've had kids of mine, family of mine, come in at various times during the keynote, and we'll talk, or and maybe it's kind of a surprise. And some of the things they say are surprises. Sometimes you never know with kids. What else? Oh, maybe I'll give an example on this. In this keynote, this last keynote that was a sales kickoff, I was in the hotel room, and the background was going to be rather boring. They didn't have a lot of patience for visuals. And so when I wrapped my point at a time, as I recorded myself, watched it. And I'm real big on watching it without sound, because I can see when it looks boring. And at a time like that, I talked about taking risks, and it set it all up with extension cords while I was there, but said sometimes you're in a place where, it just, a light goes out and it dries up, and you have to migrate to a place where there's better light. And I went into the bathroom and I put this on the edge, and I said, and sometimes it's just crazy what happens, the environment. And I turned on the shower and got underneath the shower fully clothed. And all of a sudden, every one of those salespeople's eyes had been looking down. They are glued, right? I could see them all right there. And then I got out and made a point as I'm dripping, water is dripping from me. I made a point that risks don't kill us. And I used myself as the idiot who on this national, it's global sales call, gets in the shower. It may be stupid. It may be idiotic. I was talking to you. You may have hated that, but it didn't kill me. And you're being strong, and then made the application. You're being strong in a sales engagement. When you stay to your script and you ask for double the order right in here, which was part of what they were needing me to talk about determination. And I'm sitting there with water dripping from my face, having to hold my microphone away. So we think in terms. The only reason I thought about doing that was because I happened to walk into the shower and see that it was all glass, and was thinking, what could only happen here in this room? And they loved it, and they referred me to other people. So it's a mixture. It's a mixture of, the longer it gets, it's got to be visually interesting, auditorially interesting, story interesting. It's got to be more humor, that kind of thing. Does that help?
I certainly think you gave us lots of things to try. Taking risks, right? Is really taking risks is obviously the basis of your suggestion, and I think that's a great suggestion. You've already mentioned a little bit about rehearsal until you feel calm, but or you feel a little, it's natural. But one person was asking, how do you practice a 45-minute keynote if you only have a few weeks to practice, if you have just abbreviated time? So how do you do that?
In my mind, it's broken up into chunks. If I'm really, you think about a keynote, you're giving just the key note. You're giving the one note, right? So especially if it's 25 minutes, 60 minutes, you can do that. It breaks up into chunks in my mind. And even if it's just all going to one particular something I'm saying over and over again, there is a story arc that is not 60 minutes. It may be 15 minutes, then with some application, and then another story arc. And so as I do break it up into chunks where, and I'll actually give it in my mind, I'll practice it as I'm driving on my commute or taking a walk. I might actually purposely go out and take an hour walk and just work on that one 15-minute segment. And it may be right in the middle of the speech, but I don't want it to feel like a script. I mix it up and practice it because then I want it to flow out. And that's how I do it, is practicing it in chunks, in manageable chunks. And if I only have 5 minutes between meetings, then I'll pick a story and run it super fast. Maybe a 10-minute story, a 15-minute story, and run it so fast that it only takes 5 minutes. But it's that repetitive. So that's some of the way that I'll do that. But I rarely give the entire 45-minute in one practice session.
We have a kind of a wrap up maybe question for you. Or maybe I have two more, but this one relates to, I noticed you have a website. You have your website. So people are asking questions about creating that online presence, and has becoming, the world champion of public speaking changed your life in any way? How do you create that website? Was that your design, or how do you get out there? How do you maximize your presence? What's the easiest and fastest way? Do you have to start all over, or can you go off of something you've already got going?
Yes, all the above. No, none of it. Because I've had this conversation with Verity Price. I'll go give you all. I mean, I pinged her very quickly after she went. I said, "Hey, I did a lot of things wrong in my first year because of virtual. Let me tell you everything I did wrong, so you can go do other things wrong." And she's put together. She had a speaking business before, coming in, winning the world championship. I had a little bit of one. My primary business is I've been an investment counselor for almost 30 years, and did financial seminars early on. Then there are others who had no business at all, and they were just, if they got asked to speak and it was something they thought was pretty cool, they might do it. So to broaden it out, I'll answer the questions about me, and then what I've heard is, because I knew I was not going to win the World Championship of Public Speaking, I did not have a website for that. All of a sudden that happened, and Julie, my wife, and I looked at each other and said, we're already getting calls. How do we best serve? How do we capture emails? How do we, to stay in touch, that kind of thing. So I went and broadened out social media, and she just built Wix. It's a Wix site. And Wix I've built Wix sites before and didn't really like it, and went back to WordPress, had a WordPress site. But Wix has really upped their game with lots of different programs, and easy to go in. You can do a lot of things that are plug and play in Wix that you could only do with some coding knowledge in WordPress before. So we did that. We built that. Now I need to redo it because it's aged. It's looking a little aged, and that's a constant process. So if somebody already has a really cool looking website and they win the World Championship of Public Speaking, I think it really depends on what they want to do with that. If they want to be, the second coming of Darren LaCroix and really do Toastmaster coaching and focus on that population, well, that's going to be front and center, right, on that website. Or if the World Championship is really just another piece of credential. What happened, and I'll say that what happened, I'd say most for me, is I was being referred to others to come speak about finance, about money, speak in banking, about grit, determination, and listening for leaders, that kind of thing. And event planners, event managers would say, oh, but what if he sucks? I've not heard him before. What if, well, winning the world championship, that kind of scooted that, if not off the table, it was over the edge of the table. It was a box checker. But my mission is to industry. I kind of do stuff like this with Toastmasters because I believe in the mission. And I do some coaching. I take on some individuals who are wanting me to coach them for the world championship. Haven't done a lot of that, but I'm doing, and I'll do more of that. But that's about where my limited, that's where all my pro bono work goes, is in Toastmasters. So my website will need to gravitate. And the thing I would say, and Verity has found this as well, she's gotten opportunities, and I'd be interested for you to ask Verity that question, hear how she answers it. But no one built or had a raging, successful professional public speaking business dropped in their lap because they won the world championship of public speaking. The reason that my business has thrived is because I still pound it out and have a sales process. And that's the real transparent answer. I built a financial services, business by doing seminars, but I was pounding out the phones and send out 8,000 invitations to get 10 or 20 or 50 people in a room to eat food that I couldn't afford to feed them, hoping that, a few of them would become clients. And then I had to show up and give good content, give good content in an entertaining way. Same thing's true of public speaking. It's just our product is the speech and is the content. So I hope that, I'm trying to remember, did I answer the different components?
I
the next
believe
thing
that
I will do is I'll hire, I found someone who can come in and reform my Wix site, because I don't have that time anymore. But that one we originally built, it was the night of winning the contest because we had nothing. And my WordPress site was aged.
Well, we so appreciate all of those answers. You've given us so much detail that I think any of us can go forward. We greatly appreciate your being here. I'm going to ask Debbie Jo Lindano, our District 84 Director, to come forward, please, and close our time with Mike Carr.
Oh my goodness, District 84 is so blessed to have you join us tonight. It was so inspiring, definitely a piece of art. I'm so happy we're recording because I took a lot of notes, but I want to listen to this again. Mike, we would love to give you another enormous crystal trophy, but we're going to have to simply give you a round of applause. Thank you so much.
That's even better. Thank you.
One thing I love so much about Toastmasters is, yes, we all have a story, and Toastmasters gives us that opportunity to hone our skills, to find that one person that you talked about that needs to hear our story. And that's what I love about Toastmasters. And this was so very authentic. You might even have an opportunity to get a couple of bloopers out of this reel.
Good.
Our video editor, George Hazard, will be posting this, and we'll send you a link as well. Thank you so very much. One thing that really strikes me a lot is your authenticity, and thank you so much for that. I probably won't be taking a shower during the speech, but you just never know. Thank you so much. We love to start and end on time, so we will adjourn this meeting. We're happy to hang out for post toasties for anyone who'd like to hang out and chat just a little bit. And also kudos to our most amazing PRM manager, Maria Firecracker Martinez. Thank you, Maria, for connecting with Mike and making this happen.